Earlier this year, I rebranded this show to Creators That Crush because I wanted to highlight creators that make great content and meaningful, sustainable businesses. But here's the thing, a lot of people that I was following weren't really talking to content creators, and especially not about how to thrive without burning out. So I started searching. I was commenting on posts on LinkedIn and Blue Sky, reaching out and looking for folks who were crushing it. And that's when I found Susan Boles and her podcast, Calm is the New KPI. And let me tell you, it quickly became a regular listen for me. It's so good. And after a few great exchanges on Blue Sky and LinkedIn, she agreed to join us for this show. And I'm so excited to share this one with you because here's the truth. Creators that crush build calm businesses with intent and by design. In this episode, Susan and I talk about why most creators accidentally recreate burnout, the 4 levers you can use to build margin and space in your work, and how she tracks success with metrics like unsolicited feedback and having 16 weeks off a year to spend with her family. So stick around to the end because Susan shares a mindset shift that I think completely changes how I think about growth performance and what it means to actually crush it. Welcome to the Creators That Crush podcast. I am your host and certified high performance coach, Shawn Buttner, and this is the show that helps you overcome being crushed by your creative business so you can crush it financially, personally, and with joy and impact in your life. So let's dive in. Hey, Susan, welcome to the Creators That Crush podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
So I am super excited to chat because we were just talking before we recorded. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. I believe that content creators need to have intention when they design their creative business and lives. I've been defining a creator that crushes. Sounds kind of bro-y, but a creator that crushes is someone that has a successful, profitable business and someone that is confident, joyful, and present in their work. And you do that through being sustainable. And I think calm as a KPI is one means of crushing it as a creator. So that's what we want to discuss today is, why do content creators need to design calm in their content businesses?
I think that, where you're coming from, especially the angle on joy, I think is really discussed, underrated when it comes to both business and content creation in general. So much of the messages that we get, so much of the default is the complete opposite of that. And I think when we have creative businesses, joy is one of the things that you can really lean into. It's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to suck.
Oh, definitely. So I come from a tech background and there was a startup culture where you work all these crazy hours. I've done the corporate, grand hegemon, large, big business thing where it's maximizing the amount of time you're in the business. And so how do you think about creating joy when we're all kind of conditioned to struggle, grit and bear it, persevere, never give up, get 2 hours of sleep a week, that whole.
So I like to think that my message and folks like you, we exist to help people understand that just because that's the default, just because that's the messages that we are constantly inundated with, particularly if you end up on, the tech space or the online business space, there's so much that is focused on productivity and efficiency and scaling and grow. But that is the default. That doesn't have to be the reality. And so I think, at least for me, one of the reasons I exist is to help people unpack some of that and have a vision for what the potential could be. To know that it doesn't have to be about 10xing your growth or squeezing more into every second of every day, that there is a path to have your company be both calm and successful, calm and sustainable, and that those things aren't necessarily two sides of a dichotomy, that you can have both of those things. It just requires a little bit of unpacking the default, unpacking what we are trained to kind of not even see.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. And, falling into those like unconscious like stories or habits or expectations. I'm sure it's all part of like understanding that like we're always expected to progress and move forward. And sometimes it's okay to like not maximize that part of the experience. Because I was also hearing, and maybe you could speak to this, there's like a tension between I want to 10x my business. I think that's a wonderful thing and can have a lot of wonderful implications for my family, for the work that I'm doing, for helping people out. At the same time, I personally believe that if you're not doing it in a strategic way or a thoughtful way or with purpose, you can't sustain it over the long term. So if I'm always constantly working to 10x my business and I never see my family or my friends and I never work out or I never sleep, all these things that tend to go when we're so focused on, the result.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of inherent tension, but I also think that tension is one of those things that is kind of made up, right? So if you think about the example we have of calm businesses, they're, for the most part, pretty successful from all outward measures. And when you think about the kind of ethos of a calm company, I like to think a lot of that comes from caring about the people in and around the business. That ethos of prioritizing care for the employees, for the clients and customers, for the just being very human about it. We know, like research says that when your employees, when your team members are happy and cared for, like when they know that you care about them and care about their well-being and believe them to be human beings and not a number, happy employees are more productive employees. A lot of the companies that went to a 4-day work week or none of them have had a drop in productivity. None of them have had a drop in revenue. Buffer, which is one of the kind of original like calm company avatars, I guess you could call it, just hit like $22 million. I just saw Joel's post on Blue Sky. Like they are empirically successful. And it's not in spite of them having a calm ethos. It's because of it. Uber is the kind of quintessential avatar, I think, of the let's, build it fast and break things. And I'm not sure anybody would actually describe them as a successful company. They might be a big company, but they keep getting sued. They still, as far as I know, are not actually profitable despite exploiting everybody in the entire supply chain. And so I think some of our metrics of what we consider to be success are somewhat artificial. And some of them it's just given to us because that's what we're supposed to think. We live in a capitalist society and it's all about growing. But I think there are very real examples of companies that are externally successful, profitable, sustainable, and are also calm. And those things aren't actually in contrast. They are successful because that's their ethos.
I think it gets down to, I think the core of calm is the new KPI in the idea that what is growth, right? Is growth getting on that next $100 million in revenue? Or is growth getting the next $50 million of revenue without the headaches and cost of lawsuits, of churn of your employees? Because training people costs a whole heck of a lot of money.
Expensive, and it's just, it derails your progress. If you lose a key team member and you have to find another key team member, especially if you lost that team member because you did not treat them like a human being or recognize the impact they were having on your company,
when you work with clients who maybe have lived, breathed, not calm, the opposite of calm, what are the mindset shifts that you have to unlock for those folks in order to get them to kind of realize that like there's a different way to grow that is a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more happier, a little bit more, you can feel proud about it too. I think that's another aspect of what's going on.
Lots of my clients, almost all of them universally have had a business that is not calm prior to this. But what I find is that almost everybody has a story of hitting burnout. They did the default. They built that business. Maybe they burnt it down. That's very common. We build it. We build the business we think we're supposed to have. It's externally successful. Maybe it's not super successful internally, and maybe not profitable at all. But almost universally, it seems that the experience is you have to do it the hard way before you have the realization that that is not what you want to do. And then go looking for something else. And I say this, me too. Like my business has always been about helping people run calmer businesses, but that doesn't necessarily mean that mine was always that way either. I have my own story of burnout that led me down a 2.5-year path of recovery. And so I think the mindset shift, I don't know if it's just how human beings learn things. We like to learn things the hard way. When people tell us that there is an easier way, we tend not to believe them or not to trust them. And we have to go learn the lessons ourselves. So for me, most of my clients have learned that lesson in some way, whether that led to actual burnout or not. They usually have had the experience of running something that's chaotic and frantic and exhausting. And now they've decided they don't want to do that anymore. So I think it's more internal factors than a mindset shift necessarily.
Yeah, I think, it is human nature to be like that. I would never do that to myself. Like these other people would design an 80-hour work week. I would never do that. That's
also
great.
We tend to replicate the environment for ourselves that we have seen modeled.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about, a lot of consultants and creators and coaches, most of us have come out of some sort of professional career, whether that's corporate or government or education or what have you. And when we start our companies, we replicate that. We don't know that there are other ways to do it. And I think part of the learning and growing and the maturity of becoming a more experienced business owner is learning that it doesn't have to be that way and exploring what else it could look like.
I'm so glad that you're such a good role model of this out in the world, just to acknowledge that.
Painful learning experience.
Hey, it's Shawn. Being a content creator is tough. There are so many internal and external factors that get in the way of us hitting play, recording, giving that speech, sharing on social media. That is not really the work we signed up for. We want to make the thing, but we don't want to deal with our internal self-doubts, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, self-doubt. And we don't always know, too, how to navigate the platforms to make sure that things that we're doing are maximized, right? And thinking in my creative career, I had 700 YouTube videos and 0 audience growth. I really wish I would have had someone to bounce ideas off of, to say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and maybe pull apart what's not working. And why are you doing the same thing over and over again? Or why are you trying all these things and nothing's working? You're missing a particular angle. You have a blind spot you're not addressing. Something is amiss. And I would have loved that camaraderie with someone that was advocating for me and really cared for me. And that's why, for listeners of the Creators That Crush podcast, I'm offering a free 30-minute creator strategy session because I'm a certified high-performance coach first and foremost. And what that means is I am trained in a proven science-based process to help people break through their normal, consistent results in a way that's sustainable, that does not burn them out, that does not injure their health or harm their relationships along the way. So I know that this process is fire. And what I want to do is help you. So if you are striving for something as a content creator, or there's something you are struggling with as you are on the path of building your creative empire, I'd love to talk with you for 30 minutes on whatever that is and help you develop a plan to either help you break through what's holding you back or to see the next steps going forward that'll help you realize your vision. Because we can't do everything on our own. There's only so far we can get on your own. I have 700 videos of YouTube of me going alone and not making progress. I don't want that for you. So let's hop on a call. If you go to ShawnButtner.com, you'll see a big old button for a free 30-minute strategy session. And on this call, what happens when you hit that button is you'll answer 3 questions on a form. So what are you struggling with? What are you trying to achieve? What have you tried? Super simple. You'll schedule time for us to talk. And then on that call, it's just 30 minutes of me walking you through a mini version of the coaching process to help you build a plan, to help you break through, to help you get results. At the end of that call, there's nothing for me to sell, right? I am doing these calls for this audience, for you guys right now, just one, to connect with you. I want to know what you're dealing with, what struggles you have, what aspirations you have. And I just want to get to know you too. Like, I think it's really weird for me to be talking to a camera and a microphone and it being a one-way conversation. So I'm really interested in getting to know y'all. And 2, I want to fine-tune this coaching process for content creators. So that's what I'm getting out of it. And like I said, at the end, I'm not going to sell coaching or anything. It's just going to be, hey, I get to know you. I get to understand what you're going through a little bit more. I get to test out my idea for this high-performance coaching for content creators, and everyone theoretically is happy. So if you're interested in that, go to ShawnButtner.com. I'd love to help you with that. And we'll see you on the other side. Let's get back to the episode with Susan. Do you ever see those demotivational posters? Like, my favorite one is, sometimes God puts you on the planet to be an example of what not to do. You know, I think about that.
I was very much that for most of my professional career.
So I know when I deal with like clients that have burnout, a lot of the tricky work of coaching through burnout, and maybe you've experienced this too, is getting people to realize that, and this is not the most popular opinion about burnout, but they've chosen it, right? And so a lot of times I think dealing with burnout is training people to make different decisions. Could you maybe go through some of the big decisions you've made in your business, maybe your calmer business, kind of doing the opposite of things that you've definitely chosen to be like, if I do this, it'll lead to more happiness in my life, more calm, versus sadness?
Yes. So for me, I think that there are really 4 main levers that you can pull in your company to create a calmer company. I call this the calmer framework. And there are, so the first lever is management style. And this is kind of exists on a spectrum between authoritarian and autonomous. And so authoritarian, that's the default. That's the kind of corporate work environments we are describing, where somebody is likely micromanaging. The manager is making all of the decisions. You have no choice of your schedule, what you're working on. Any of those things are not within your control, versus what I tend to think is a little bit more calmer management style, which is more autonomous. So we're focusing on, as the leader, giving clarity so that people can control their work, because happy employees generally have autonomy to choose how and when they go about doing work. The second lever is values and people. So we're thinking on a spectrum from exploitative to empathetic. And this is what we were talking about before, focusing on it being very human focused. And then business design. So we're thinking involuntary to intentional. And that's really what we're talking about right here is making intentional choices so that you can design a business that works the way that you want to work, the way that works for your life, that supports you versus you existing for the company. And then the fourth lever is how we're using efficiency. So I like to say you can use the goal of efficiency for good or for evil. And in kind of the default company, we are using efficiency to max things out. We're using it to try and shove more stuff into our day. So we're trying to be really efficient so that we can do more. Versus in a calmer company, we're using efficiency to build margins. We're using efficiency to build space so that we can do other things. I like to think the word margin, and the reason I named my company but not beyond margins is because I like to think beyond just the profit margins. Margins literally means space, whether that's financial resources, time. Margins is what we're aiming for. And so for me, one of the main levers I tend to use is that business design lever and thinking intentionally about what kinds of services do you want to offer? What kinds of products are right for you? What industry do you want to be in? How do you want to deliver those things? There are literally thousands of ways that you can go about designing and building your business. And as long as you're intentional about that and you're making the choices that are the right choice for you and your business and how you want to live your life, you ultimately will likely end up creating a business that has more margin, that is calmer. So for me, when I was coming back from burnout and spent a lot of time thinking about what do I want my business to be about? Like I'm clearly burnt out. I'm not doing okay when I come back.
Yeah.
What do I want that to be? And for me, that ended up being the word calm. I wanted it to be calm. And so that influenced how I chose to offer services. Do most of my work in intensive styles. So like we are doing a done in the day offer, or we're doing a half day intensive where, it's done, you get results, and I then have control over my schedule because I am not somebody who I like sprinting. Like I am a sprinter. I am a batcher. I like being really, really deep in focus and then taking a break. And so I really took that into consideration when I was thinking about knowing that I know that about myself, how do I design my business to lean into that, to accommodate that instead of to act in contrast to that?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're trying to find alignment, right? I think that's currency that I talk in with my clients. It's what are your values? Where do you find, like, asking this question usually is really fun. Is like, what do you find fun in the things that you do? It's like, oh, I really love doing webinars, but I really hate doing the other things. It's like, well, why don't you do the fun thing more?
Yeah, one of the questions I like to ask is what feels easiest? So, because most of the time that's not what we're going with, right? And so I like to kind of ask, if there's more than one option, which one feels easier to you? That answer is going to be different for everybody. But ultimately, going with things that are easier is inherently calmer.
Yeah, I've been testing. I'm not sure if I heard this anywhere or not, but like the things that we resist will not persist. Just kind of drilling that into what I'm doing in my business and just trying to figure out where do I like to play. And so on that, if you're working with someone that's maybe new to business or is like creators, there's a lot of creators that, can get millions of views and have zero business to sustain the creativity long term, which is not calm or it's not sustainable. It's not performative in my views. How would you walk someone through really discovering what their maybe like powerful one services to start out with to really dig into?
So I think it starts with what feels easy, what feels fun. In reality, you can't do everything. And expecting to do everything is how people end up burnt out. That's how they end up really overwhelmed, is they see really big creators that seem like they're just them, when in reality, they have an entire production company, media company apparatus behind them, right? Like they've got a YouTube editor and they've got a podcast editor and they've got a whole social media agency that's running, you know what I mean? Like but on the surface, if you look at them, it looks like it's just them. So until you like really dig underneath the surface, you're setting expectations for yourself that are completely unrealistic. The most important thing is to focus. Tackle one thing first and focus on just one thing, because then you're not trying to do all of the things and you're getting really, really good at one thing. The better you get at the one thing, the easier it actually gets, right? So when you're doing a podcast, the first 10 episodes feel really, really, really hard. But the 100th episode feels completely natural. You've got systems, you have processes, you've done the reps. And so it's so much easier to then add another channel or add another focus after you've really streamlined and systematized and gotten good at the one area. And so for me, the thing has always been, and I still hate it when I say this, learning to let go of urgency a little bit and be a little bit more patient. Things take so much longer than we think they are going to. And most of the time we think things aren't working, it's because we haven't given it enough of a shot. We haven't given it enough time. We haven't done enough reps of that thing. And when you start then setting expectations that you can do 8 things when you're still learning how to do 1, that's where we get overwhelmed. But if we focus on one thing, one channel, get really good at that before you're adding other things, that gives you margin. It builds margin and it builds a calmer company. Most of the big folks that are big now have been doing it for a decade and they started with one channel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Ali Abdaal started on YouTube. Jay Klaus started a podcast. You know, he was behind the scenes of Pat Flynn's business. Like he had a lot of experience starting his own business, but he's still been doing it like a decade almost.
Yeah.
And he's on all the channels now, but he didn't start like that.
And he has a team now, right?
He does have a team now, yeah.
I'm guessing maybe you have more experienced business folks coming to you for your business, but how much time do you put on, like, hey, I want to do a newsletter? Like, great. Like, on top of everything else you're doing, you want to do a newsletter. You need to stick with it for 3 months, a year, 30 years. You're like, what? How do you know? I guess, how would you measure, is this worth continuing to keep my business calm?
So I can talk to my experience, which was I started a podcast because the thing that felt most natural to me was talking, not writing. Writing has been a bit of a struggle for me. Not that I can't do it, but that it is not naturally how my brain thinks. Like some people naturally think in writing, like Tara McMullen, Jaya Kunzo, like they are writers first and foremost, and other channels come later. And for me, I was trying to decide, like, I know I need to pick a platform. I need to be a little bit more visible. What do I want? What feels fun right now? Which is why I picked podcast, because it felt like my natural medium. And I committed to it. I said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to focus on just doing it. I'm going to put out an episode every single week and I'm going to do that for 6 months. And I'm going to look at 0 stats. Until then, I'm not going to evaluate the decision. I'm just going to focus on the process. I'm going to focus on getting it out. I'm going to focus on becoming a better interviewer. I'm going to focus on making sure that my production process is really streamlined. And I'm not going to see if it's quote unquote worth it for at least 6 months. And when I hit the 6-month mark, I started to get little glimmers. Like people will be like, oh, I've heard your podcast. I love it. I shared it with my friend. And so at the 6-month mark, I said, okay, there's some signals here that are telling me this is working. I think I need to give it another 6 months. And 5 years later, here I am.
I love that.
But I also didn't have a newsletter because I didn't want to deal with writing a newsletter. I wanted to focus on the podcast and the podcast being my main channel. So I focused on the podcast. And then when I felt like I had nailed the podcast, I had got production process, my editor and I, are working in sync, all of those things. Then I thought, okay, I have the capacity to add something else. What else makes sense for my business, still feels fun, and not overwhelming? And that at that point, I added LinkedIn as a channel. And I did LinkedIn plus the podcast for like 2 years. And then honestly, it was only a year and a half ago now, maybe almost 2 years, that I was like, okay, cool. Now I feel like a newsletter is something I'm interested in, and started adding that. But I still don't do any more than those 3 channels. Then that keeps things calm because every time I built a system, I created the capacity to do the thing. Honestly, on a lot of them, I created a backlog before it even launched. Right? So like when I launched the podcast, I had 8 episodes in the can. When I launched the newsletter, I had 8 email newsletters ready to go so that if I struggled with the workload, if I started to hit a wall when I came into like having ideas, I had a buffer. So really, I think, commit to something for 6 months, give it a test, figure out when you start what your version of success for that would be, right? Because your definition of success is going to be completely different than somebody else's. When I started my podcast, the goal was close new clients. It wasn't build audience. It wasn't, advocate for my ideas. It was, I want to close clients. The point of this thing is to close clients. So I was evaluating, is it closing clients? Not, are my download metrics huge? Or, do I have sponsorship deals? Because I wasn't even taking sponsorship deals, right? So when you decide on an experiment, and I tend to think of these things as like, this is an experiment. This is something I'm testing. Figure out at the beginning what measure of success is. What are you measuring against? And then how long do I think this thing is going to take? And then just go put it in your calendar or your project management system. Like put it there to remind you to check in on whatever that measure of success is, and then completely ignore it and focus on do the thing, do the process, focus on getting good.
So you mentioned that calm is margins too, and time and resources financially. Is like, how does that show up in your business? Do you have like, for you and your team, like on a whiteboard, like we will get to go home at 5 o'clock to see our families, or like, how does that look like as a goal? Because KPIs are like the high level goals. So how do you communicate that through your organization?
I think it looks different in every organization. Think of calm more as a North Star. That's what we're aiming for. But what that actually is going to be different for every founder, for every creator, for every organization. Calm is really more, to me, an ethos and a North Star. That's what we're aiming for. But what that is on the detail is going to be different. How you measure that is going to be different because it's informed by what is important to you, right? So what are your goals? What are your intentions? Where are you on each of the levers? So one of the series that I do on my podcast is Calmer KPIs. And the point of that is to highlight different or unique KPIs that calm companies are measuring. So it might be content focused. So I did an episode with Kendall Cherry where her Calm KPI was on fewest pieces of content. Like that was her goal. That's what she set. So she's a copywriter, and her goal each month was to write fewer than 6 new pieces of content for her own business. Jay Acunzo has a metric called unsolicited response rate that measures resonance. So he created a 6-point scale, I think it is, to measure whether or not his content is resonating. So for both of them, those metrics mean that they are running a calmer company, that they are focusing on the thing that is important to them. But that metric isn't necessarily going to apply to a different company. So it's all about figuring out what's important to you, what matters to you, what does calm look like to you, and then working backward, like we talked about, what does success look like in that picture? So like last year for myself, I set a goal of taking 12 full weeks off from my business. I measured it. I tracked it. I checked in with it periodically throughout the year. And that was my one big metric that I was measuring last year. And this year I upped it to 16 weeks. So I think it looks different for different people. For me, rest is really important in this season of my life. So that is what I need for it to feel calm. And so it's going to look different depending on what's important to you, what your company structure is, how you value those things. And it's all about calibrating each of the individual levers to fit you, to fit your company, to fit the season of your business.
So yeah, the episode with Jay Kanzu is really amazing. So if you're listening and you haven't checked out Calm is the New KPI, check out that particular episode. Like it resonated with me. So we're kind of getting to the end of the hour. So I like to wrap up with 2 questions. First one is, what have you found surprising or beautiful in helping people and companies make Calm their new KPI?
I think the best thing is kind of watching somebody realize that they can define their company for themselves, right? We are designing something that actually works for them, and they get to like feel that business for the first time. And they're like, I picked up my kid at the soccer game and I never would have been able to do that. I stopped working on the weekend, or, you know what I mean? Like you can see what matters to them and see a genuine impact on their actual life. That's pretty freaking cool.
Awesome. I love doing these interviews because people love to help. You know, everyone that I've interviewed has got a heart of service. And that's the thing that kind of lights them up. So it's just so cool to see you doing that work out there. Final question before we get into where people can follow up with you is, what did you love about our conversation today?
I haven't gotten to talk about this with somebody that is kind of in the same space. And it is always so cool to see how you're thinking about it. Like, what are the words that you're using that resonate with you, and be able to really, like, one of the things I just love about podcasts in general, whether it's as a host, whether it's as a guest, is the like getting new ideas. Like it's always so creatively energizing for me. And this was absolutely that. So thank you.
Heck yeah. Awesome. That means it's working. So with that said, then, where can the good folks listening, what's the best way to follow up with you?
So checking out the podcast, if you're a podcast listener, podcast is obviously a channel you like. Calm is the New KPI. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. But if you are more of like a written person, I send a newsletter every week that you can sign up for at beyondmargins.com. Or
Awesome.
Just send me an email, hit me up on LinkedIn. Like, yep. That's how we met.
Yeah. No, totally. Susan, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have the link to your podcast in the show notes. With that, we'll see you guys on the next episode of Creators That Crush. Thanks.